The air of Tarsis Ultima tasted of incense and blood. Its spires reached heavenward like broken prayers, each crowned with statues eroded by centuries of reverent decay. I stood upon the ramparts of the Basilica Invictus, helm maglocked beneath my arm, watching storm fronts roll across a sky bruised by orbital bombardment. The shrine world had been a beacon of the Emperor's light once. Now it flickered, guttering like a dying votive. I could feel the coming storm, not of weather, but of faith. My brothers prepared below me, their movements precise as liturgy. Every armor plate bore the blue and gold of Ultramar, each purity seal fluttering in the ash-thick wind. We were the chosen defenders of this sanctified soil, custodians of relics that whispered with holy resonance. Yet as the distant horizon bled red with the fires of heresy, I sensed a fracture in our perfection, a tremor behind every prayer, a hesitation before every vow. We had come here expecting a purge, a simple reclamation of sacred ground. Instead, we found a crucible. The enemy was not merely chaos renegades. They were sons of Guilliman's ancient foes, the word-bearers, zealots who worshipped the warp as a god. Their sermons twisted the airwaves. Their chants seeped into the vox as a psalm of madness. Their invasion was not to conquer, but to convert. And conversion, I feared, was more contagious than death. In the first week, they struck the outer cathedra. Their assault was ritualistic, every bombardment timed with unholy incantation. We countered with orbital fire, our bombardment guided by the Codex and sanctified by the Librarius. But even as their ranks burned, they sang. Even as our shells broke their armor, they praised their dark pantheon. To kill such foes was to war against conviction itself. I remember the first casualty with painful clarity. Brother Leontus, pious, unflinching, his oaths recited before every dawn, was found in the reliquary, helm removed, eyes burnt hollow from within. His hands clutched his bolter as if in prayer, and across his breastplate words had been carved in his own gauntleted hand. "The Emperor is silent." I ordered his body burned. I did not tell the others that the words had been written in High Gothic, identical to my own hand. The chaplain preached fervently that night. His Crozius Arcanum glowed beneath the shrine's fractured vaults, and his voice carried over the roar of distant artillery. He spoke of endurance, of faith forged in the fires of doubt. Yet I saw how his eyes lingered upon the gathered brothers, counting the faces as if to ensure their number had not diminished beyond flesh. The corruption we fought outside was beginning to echo within. By the second week, the heretics breached the hallowed plains of Eucarion. Their corrupted land raiders tore through the sacred gardens, crushing millennia-old shrines beneath their treads. We counterattacked with precision drop strikes, descending like angels of retribution from orbit. I led the assault personally, my power sword Veritas Invicta, humming with azure light as it cut through the first of their corrupted champions. His armor, once loyal crimson, now throbbed with demon sigils that bled when struck. Their leader's voice haunted the Vox channels, Arch-Corruptor Malchad, a word-bearer dark apostle. He spoke with a tone both mocking and reverent, reciting the litanies of the warp as though quoting from the Codex itself. "You kneel to a corpse," he said once during a lull between bombardments. "We kneel to the living storm." I silenced his signal with a concentrated orbital strike, but his words lingered long after the static faded. Every dawn became a sermon of defiance. We offered rites before our bolters, anointed our blades in machine oil mixed with incense. The servitors recited prayers to the machine spirits, their monotone voices echoing down shattered corridors. Yet the silence between those rituals grew heavier. I could feel it, that waiting presence beneath the marble floors of the basilica, like something ancient holding its breath. When the enemy finally breached the perimeter of the southern walls, the battle became a hymn of annihilation. My command squad fought beside me, each warrior a living verse of the Emperor's will. The air was filled with bolter detonations and the metallic tang of ozone from power weapons. In that crucible, I forgot my doubts for a time. There was only war, a pure, immediate, sanctified, but in victory whispers returned. Reports from the apothecarian spoke of brothers who heard voices in their dreams, not demonic, but familiar. Some claimed to hear Guilliman's voice weeping. Others spoke of the Emperor's silence, breaking into distant laughter. The chaplain dismissed such talk as fatigue. I did not. When I prayed before the altar of St. Livia's bones, I felt warmth through my gauntlets, not divine but pulsing like blood. I withdrew my hands in alarm. The relic's aura had changed. Once radiant, it now emanated something heavier, something almost alive. I told myself it was merely the echo of the warp storm above. But faith has its own gravity, and mine was shifting. The skies darkened that evening, split by lightning that screamed in vox-distorted echoes. Our orbiting fleet reported disturbances, gravitational anomalies, psychic interference, ships blinking out of existence. The word-bearers' rituals had reached a crescendo. They were not merely sieging a world, they were summoning something through its wounds. I convened my lieutenants beneath the basilica's central dome. The air smelled of oil and dust, the candles guttered as if reluctant to burn. Each man spoke with the discipline of an ultramarine, yet I saw it, the flicker of unease behind their visors. We were trained to fight heresy, but what if heresy no longer came from without? Brother Sergeant Tiberon questioned the relic vaults. He claimed he saw the servo skulls whispering in tongues, their optical lenses leaking fluid like tears. The tech marines dismissed him, yet their prayers to the machine spirits grew longer each night. The rites were expanding, consuming more words, more blood, as if appeasement required sacrifice. Outside, the chanting of the word-bearers grew louder. They had erected icons carved from the bones of our fallen, daubed with runes that pulsed in counterpoint to the cathedral bells. Their siege was theological, every strike a verse in an antipsalm written in flesh. And I, defender of Ultramar, was losing the argument. I walked among the wounded that night. Rows of Astartes lay silent, their respirators hissing in rhythm with the thunder outside. One of them, Brother Castor, reached for my gauntlet and whispered, "Captain, the Emperor bleeds beneath the earth." He died before I could demand explanation. When I turned, the apothecary avoided my gaze. At dawn, we discovered the western sanctum defiled. The mural of Guilliman's ascension had been repainted in blood, the Primarch's face replaced by a blank, radiant void. Beneath it, someone had written, "Truth is not found in silence, but in screams." No breach was recorded. The purity seals were unbroken. Yet the stain was there, inside, not out. I gathered my brothers before the altar once more. We prayed louder, shouted our faith into the roaring void. And when our voices faltered, I shouted for them. I would not allow fear to root in sacred soil. And yet, even as I spoke of duty and honor, a part of me wondered, what if the heretics had not brought corruption here? What if they had merely awakened what already slept beneath the marble? That night, as the stars vanished one by one behind the warp storm, I stood alone upon the rampart. My armor was dusted with ash, my banner torn, my soul heavy. I looked toward the horizon where fire met night, and whispered the only truth I dared admit. Faith, I said to the silence, is not purity. It is endurance. The storm answered in thunder. The second month of siege began with the tolling of bells that no longer existed. Their echoes came from beneath the earth, reverberating through the marble foundations of the Basilica Invictus. Some said it was seismic disturbance. Others whispered that the world itself had begun to pray. I knew better. The bells were not calling the faithful, they were calling the lost. The word-bearers advanced with renewed fervor, their ranks swollen by cultists and mortal zealots. They came like waves, their flesh branded with runes that glowed as they died. We repelled them, again and again with the cold efficiency of sons of Guilliman. But each victory felt hollow, as though the air itself grew more profane with every corpse that bled upon the sanctified ground. My bolter hand had begun to tremble, not from fatigue, as an ultramarine does not tire, but from something deeper. The recoil of each shot felt heavier, as though the weapon resisted its purpose. The machine spirit of Invictus's wrath had begun to whine at prayer's end. I spent long hours in supplication to appease it, whispering rites of purity beneath the dim votive light, but the weapon's spirit remained sullen. Brother Sergeant Tiberon approached me in secret. He confessed that he had seen Librarian Cassian meditating without wards, the runes of protection unlit, his psychic aura pulsing with colors not seen in any sanctioned spectrum. I chastised Tiberon for spreading suspicion, but inside I feared he spoke truth. The librarian's eyes had changed. The blue of Ultramar had begun to cloud into violet. That night, I confronted Cassian in the relic vault. He was kneeling before the skull of St. Livia, whispering in tongues I did not recognize. The relic's halo flickered with light that pulsed in rhythm to his words. When I demanded explanation, he raised his gaze slowly and said, "The Emperor speaks again, Captain, but he whispers through the storm now." I struck him then, a reflex born of fear disguised as duty. Cassian fell to one knee, unarmored, and smiled as blood traced the edge of his mouth. "How you feel it too," he murmured, the veil thinning. He is not silent anymore. I ordered him confined to the apothecarian for spiritual observation. The chaplain agreed, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. No one quoted the codex that night. By the next dawn, Cassian was gone. His bindings lay open, the purity seals peeled away from his armor, the parchment curled as if by unseen fire. He had left behind his force staff, now blackened at the core. Upon the apothecarian wall, written in blood not his own, was the phrase, "Faith must evolve." It was written in perfect script, the kind taught on Macragge itself. The battle outside mirrored our turmoil. The word-bearers unleashed demonic engines upon the plains, brass constructs bound with flesh and fire, walking like cathedrals of agony. We met them with melter-fire and crack missiles, their screams merging with the storm's chorus. When their husks fell, they released not smoke but flocks of burning wings that shrieked blasphemies as they disintegrated into ash. I fought at the forefront, blades singing, armor cracked and blackened by warp discharge. Each kill brought no satisfaction, only the creeping suspicion that I was fighting shadows cast by our own sins. When I looked upon my brothers, I saw hesitation masked as valor. We were ultramarines still, but our discipline had become armor against doubt rather than faith. Reports reached me that our communications were failing. Vox codes scrambled, astropathic signals distorted into scripture fragments. One transmission from orbit repeated a single phrase, "We are judged," then silence. The fleet was gone from the Empyrean, or perhaps consumed by it. I told my men the link was lost due to the storm. They deserved the illusion of command. In the evenings, I began hearing the chants myself. At first faint, the word-bearers' psalms carried on the wind. But soon they came from within the walls, echoing down empty corridors. Sometimes I followed them, bolter ready, yet found only extinguished candles and the faint scent of myrrh. Once I found the hymnals open on the lectern, the ink rearranged into new verses overnight. The words praised both Emperor and Storm Chaplain Dorius became increasingly erratic. His sermons turned from defiance to revelation. He spoke of duality, of the Emperor's divine wrath being inseparable from the warp's fury. "All flame consumes," he said during a midnight litany, "and what is chaos if not the Emperor's shadow?" I should have silenced him. Instead, I listened. We discovered the first signs of internal heresy soon after. 3 neophytes of the Reclusium were found mutilated near the western transept, their gene seed missing. The purity seals above them were arranged into a sigil I could not decipher, yet it pulsed faintly when touched. The Tech Marines burned the corpses without ceremony. I did not ask for an autopsy. I feared the answer. Each day became a liturgy of denial. We prayed longer, fought harder, buried more. The shrine bells, or whatever hollow resonance imitated them, continued beneath our feet. They marked time not by victory but by erosion. I began to think the world itself sought absolution through destruction. When the heretics breached the catacombs, I led the counter-assault. The tunnels beneath the basilica were narrow, their walls carved with prayers older than our chapter. The enemy had defiled them with sigils of the Dark Tongue. We fought in darkness lit only by muzzle flare and the flicker of sacred oils. In that stifling war, I saw the truth. Many of the symbols mirrored our own, purity and blasphemy intertwined like veins. In the heart of the catacombs, I found Cassian again. He was unhelmed, his face radiant with a fevered light, his eyes burning violet. Around him, fallen ultramarines knelt in stillness, their armor cracked open as if by unseen hands. "You cannot silence what is already divine," he said. "The Emperor's voice is the warp itself. He was never apart from it." His words cut deeper than any blade. I raised Veritas Invicta and charged, but he did not resist. My sword cleaved through him, burning his flesh to ash. Yet as his body fell, I felt warmth bloom through my armor, as if I had severed not flesh but the tether between faith and fear. His dying words echoed in the Vox. "He watches through the storm, brother. Through you, Afterward, I sealed the catacombs and forbade further descent. I told the chaplain Cassian had perished purging demons. He nodded without belief. In his next sermon, he replaced the phrase "by the Emperor's will" with "by the Emperor's storm." None corrected him. I began to suspect none wished to. That night, I stood before the relic of St. Livia once more. The aura had changed again, now warm, almost tender. When I touched it, my vision filled with 1,000 whispers, indistinct yet unified, like a chorus of submerged prayers. They spoke of evolution, of strength through trial. I recoiled, yet part of me longed to listen longer. The next dawn revealed crimson skies and rivers of molten glass across the plains. The enemy had unleashed warp-fire artillery. Our defenses burned, yet the basilica stood untouched, as if the storm itself shielded it. The word-bearers howled in frustration, their chants breaking rhythm. For a moment I thought I heard laughter carried on the wind, not mocking but approving, and in that terrible stillness between bombardments, I finally understood what haunted me. The corruption we feared was not spreading from the enemy. It was rising from within the shrine itself, through faith transfigured into something new. And as I gazed upon the basilica's burning towers, I could not tell whether the Emperor was saving us or reshaping us. When dawn returned, it brought no light, only a pallid haze that clung to the ruined spires like a shroud. The Basilica Invictus stood wounded yet unfallen, its stained glass bleeding red from the fires below. The word-bearers had withdrawn, regrouping for a final strike. In their absence, silence reigned, but it was not peace. It was the silence of held breath, of a world waiting for judgment. I felt it in the marrow of my bones. My brothers moved like phantoms through the cloisters. Their prayers grew softer, less structured, their recitations slipping into unsanctioned cadences. Even the purity seals upon their armor began to peel, as though the parchment rejected the words once inscribed. The chaplain no longer spoke of heresy, but of revelation. I watched him burn incense that smelled faintly of ozone and decay, his eyes reflecting violet fire. I said nothing. A captain's silence is sometimes the only shield left. I walked the basilica's nave alone, the floor slick with ash and oil. The statues of saints loomed above, cracked and eyeless. So I paused before one, Saint Verana, martyr of Ultramar, and saw that her stone face had changed. The features now mirrored those of my own Primarch, serene yet sorrowful. Beneath her feet, the marble rippled faintly as if something stirred below. My faith trembled, but my duty held. It had to. When the next attack came, it was not from beyond the walls, but from within. The chapter serfs who had once tended our armory rose in madness. Their flesh carved with holy symbols turned inward. They screamed prayers to the living storm, their voices reverent, not rabid. My brothers cut them down, bolters roaring through corridors once reserved for psalms. Even as their bodies fell, some reached upward, smiling as if ascending into grace. I ordered their corpses burned, though my hands shook as I gave the command. Chaplain Dorius confronted me after the purge. His armor was blackened by fire, his crozius crackling with errant warp light. "You cannot deny it, brother captain," he said. "The Emperor has awakened within the storm. We are his renewal." I demanded silence, called him heretic. He only laughed softly, a sound filled with devotion rather than defiance. "Then you are the last blind man among the blessed." I should have struck him then. Instead, I turned away. Leadership demands conviction, yet mine was eroding beneath each revelation. I returned to my quarters and stared at the Codex Astartes resting upon my desk, the book I had memorized since youth. Its words now felt brittle, the ink fading. I traced the letters, whispering their meaning, but they no longer kindled faith. They sounded like tactics spoken by ghosts. Reports came from the southern bastions, brothers refusing orders, kneeling mid-battle to recite verses that did not exist in any catechism. They fought harder afterward, faster, as if guided by invisible hands. Our casualty rates dropped even as coherence dissolved. I saw warriors strike with precision beyond mortal calculation, but their eyes glowed faintly, unnaturally. I should have feared them. Instead, I envied them. In the Apothecarian, I examined the gene seed of the fallen. Some samples pulsed faintly with energy, not decay, but mutation. Under the auspex, they shimmered with threads of warp light, delicate and terrible. I ordered them sealed, but I could not destroy them. They were changing and adapting, as though guided by a force that knew us better than we knew ourselves. That night I dreamt of Gilliman. He stood upon the burning plains of Tarsis, his armor radiant, his expression unreadable. "Do you still know my name?" he asked. I tried to answer, but no sound came. He looked skyward, and I saw the Emperor's light split into two, one golden, one violet. When I awoke, my armor's auto-senses registered psychic residue. The dream had not been mine alone. At dawn, the chaplain gathered a contingent of brothers in the sanctum. Their armor bore new sigils, not chaos, but something akin to both. I confronted him before the altar of St. Livia. He spoke calmly, his voice carrying the rhythm of ritual. "We are the Emperor's evolution, Captain. He no longer demands obedience, and he demands comprehension." His words were a blade twisting in my creed. I saw in him both heretic and prophet. When I ordered him arrested, half my company hesitated. Their hesitation cut deeper than any betrayal. For a heartbeat, I felt the weight of command crumble. Then Brother Tiberan fired. A single bolt around that shattered the chaplain's skull. The sanctum fell into silence. I declared the act necessary. But as I looked upon Dorius's corpse, I thought I saw him smile still, as though martyrdom had been his final sermon. Afterward, we sealed the sanctum. I forbade any mention of Dorius's doctrines, yet even as we resumed combat drills, his words clung to us. We fought harder, prayed longer, yet the boundary between faith and madness had dissolved. The Codex could no longer command hearts that had seen the divine bleed. The word-bearers returned that week, their banners aflame with scripture written in living tongues. They marched beneath crimson lightning, their chants harmonizing with the thunder. But when they reached the basilica's walls, they faltered. I watched through magnoculars as they gazed upon our fortifications and knelt, not in worship of their gods, but in awe. The basilica itself had changed. Its towers twisted slightly, no longer symmetrical, as if reaching toward the storm. Our fortress had become a shrine to something neither loyal nor profane. Its aura pulsed with both sanctity and corruption. The word-bearers hesitated, and that hesitation was our salvation. I seized the moment, launching a counterattack that tore through their front lines. We fought beneath skies that shimmered violet and gold, our bolters singing hymns of defiance. In that madness, I felt clarity. Perhaps faith required the storm after all. When the battle ended, I stood amidst the corpses of friend and foe alike. The ground quivered with energy. Lightning coiled around the basilica's spires, illuminating inscriptions that had never been there before. Verses of transformation written in fire. I realized then that victory and corruption had become indistinguishable. We were not defending the Emperor's world anymore. We were birthing his new truth. I prayed then, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. "If this is heresy," I whispered, "then let me be its instrument." My words felt both alien and pure. The storm answered in kind, thunder rolling like distant laughter or perhaps applause. I raised my gaze to the heavens, and for the first time I saw the warp not as an enemy but as a mirror. In that reflection I saw myself, no longer the perfect son of Ultramar, but something else. Something freer, more terrible. I did not yet know whether that was damnation or ascension, only that it was inevitable. The final assault began beneath skies of molten scripture. The storm had ceased to move. It simply hung above the world, a vast halo of shifting light, neither day nor night. Warp lightning crawled through the clouds like veins through flesh. From its depths descended the heretic's final wave, an army of word-bearers and demonic constructs, chanting as one organism. Their hymn was a roar, a living liturgy that shook the basilica's foundations. We met them in silence. My brothers stood in the ruins of the western wall, their armor cracked, their banners torn, their faces set in grim resolve. We were few, less than a company, but each warrior burned with something beyond fury. When the order came, our bolters roared like organs of judgment. The first ranks of heretics fell, bodies bursting into clouds of phosphorescent ash. Still they came. I advanced at the vanguard, Veritas Invicta humming with divine resonance. My every strike felt guided not by training, but by a rhythm older than thought. The enemy's blades screamed against my parries, sparks falling like stars. A word-bearer champion met my gaze through the smoke, his armor inscribed with both scripture and scars. We circled like predators who remembered brotherhood. He spoke through his vox grill, voice calm amid the carnage. "You feel it too, don't you? The Emperor's true face revealed in stormlight. I answered with a thrust that shattered his guard and split his helm. "I feel his will," I said, "and his will burns heresy to silence." Yet as he fell, I saw relief in his eyes and not fear. Perhaps he had wanted to die in faith, not blasphemy. The battle devolved into chaos. Flamers turned the air into molten gold. Plasma fire streaked like comets through the smoke. The basilica's bells, those impossible subterranean chimes, rang louder than ever, their tones synchronizing with the thunder. The ground beneath our feet pulsed as though alive. For every heretic slain, 2 rose in his place, driven not by orders but revelation. At my side, Brother Tiberon fought like an avatar of wrath. His bolter was dry, his chainsword broken, yet he continued with bare hands, tearing through cultists and demonkin alike. I saw the stormlight reflected in his eyes, twin suns of gold and violet. When I called his name, he did not answer. His mouth moved, whispering words I could not hear, perhaps too holy or too damned to be voiced aloud. The enemy's dark apostle emerged at last. Malkad, the arch-corrupter. His armor shimmered with warp scripture that crawled like living chains. He carried a staff crowned with a bleeding eye that watched even as he fought. Around him, reality bent. His every step left ripples in the air, as though the warp itself bowed to his sermon. "You defend an illusion," he said. "Your emperor and my gods are one voice divided by pride." I charged him through the haze of gunfire. The clash of our blades sent waves of force rippling through the basilica's shattered nave. His staff struck my pauldron, splintering ceramite. My sword pierced his chest, yet he only laughed, blood hissing like steam. "You are closer to truth than you dare believe," he whispered, his breath smelling of incense and corrosion. "Let go, Captain. The storm is not your enemy." For a heartbeat I hesitated. His words echoed those of Cassian, those of the chaplain. The storm above pulsed brighter, as if waiting for my decision. Then Tiberon appeared, seizing the dark apostle from behind. "For Ultramar," he bellowed, detonating a cracked grenade at point-blank range. The explosion tore the chamber apart, hurling me through the nave's ruined archways. When I rose, the basilica's ceiling was gone, replaced by the storm's eye. A vast vortex churned above, golden at its center, violet at its edges. Shapes moved within it, angelic and monstrous, indistinguishable. The word-bearers broke, their discipline dissolving into ecstatic frenzy. They believed their gods were descending. I realized they might be right. I rallied my surviving brothers. We pushed outward, cutting through the disordered heretics. The ground trembled, fractures spiderwebbing through the marble. Holy oil spilled from shattered altars, igniting into rivers of flame. In that infernal light, we were indistinguishable from our foes. Only our banners marked us, and even they burned into unrecognizable sigils as the wind howled. I reached the altar of St. Livia once more. The relic glowed with impossible brilliance, its halo now a sphere of coalescing energy. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I fell to one knee before it, torn between reverence and dread. "Emperor," I whispered, "grant me purpose." The light answered, as not with warmth, but with revelation. I saw visions. Ultramarines kneeling beside word-bearers, angels and demons praying to the same sun. Unity born of paradox. Outside, the word-bearers began to chant again, but this time their voices harmonized with ours. The storm's thunder merged with the bells tolling, forming a single vast chorus that transcended war. I felt it, faith and heresy dissolving into one continuum. The air shimmered as reality thinned, revealing the warp not as chaos but as reflection, the Emperor's divine unconscious. Tiberon reappeared, his armor cracked, his face bare. He knelt before me, blood dripping from his chin. "Captain," he rasped, "I have seen him." I gripped his shoulder. "Where?" "Everywhere," he said, eyes wide. "In the enemy and the storm in us. We are the same prayer, spoken in different tongues. I should have condemned him." Then instead I wept. Malchad's laughter echoed from the ruins, though his body was gone. "You'll see it now," his voice said from the thunder. The Emperor's perfection was never purity. It was transformation. I shouted into the storm that he lied, but even as I spoke, lightning shaped itself into a human silhouette, radiant, faceless, vast. My heart stilled. It bowed its head as if in acknowledgement. The warp howled and the ground split open beneath the basilica. A column of light rose, devouring the altar, the relic and everything sacred. I gave the evacuation order, but few remained to hear it. The survivors fled into the ruins while I stayed, staring into the storm's heart. I had defended this world for months, only to realize it was no longer the Emperor's shrine. It had become his metamorphosis. The storm descended. It did not consume him, it redefined. The ruins around me turned to glass, the ashes of the fallen reassembling into new forms, statues half human, half divine. The light filled my armor, searing yet intimate. I felt my thoughts expand, my fears dissolve. The Emperor's silence was gone. In its place was endless, resonant presence. It spoke without words. Adaptation is worship, I screamed, not in pain but in surrender. Every oath, every code, every verse I had memorized burned away, leaving only essence. A warrior's devotion to order amid the storm. I saw the lie. Chaos and the Imperium were two reflections of the same eternal machine. And in that revelation, I felt peace sharper than any blade. When the light receded, I stood upon scorched ground. The basilica was gone, replaced by a crater that pulsed faintly with golden light. Around me, no enemy moved. The word-bearers had vanished, consumed or transformed, I could not say. My brothers knelt in silence, eyes empty, yet glowing faintly. We had survived, but we were not the same. I looked skyward. The storm still lingered, but quieter now, its color subdued to a deep indigo. The bells beneath the world ceased. For the first time in months, I heard my own breathing through the vox. "The Emperor protects," I said softly, and for the first time I wondered whether it was a promise or a threat. When dawn returned to Tarsis Ultima, it brought no sun, only a pale shimmer upon the horizon, as though the heavens themselves hesitated to look upon what they had wrought. The air was still, thick with incense and ruin. The storm had receded into the upper atmosphere, leaving auroras of gold and violet that burned even in daylight. I stood amidst the crater where the Basilica Invictus had once risen, and felt both victory and extinction. The Vox was silent. Our fleet did not respond. Perhaps it had perished. Perhaps it watched in judgment. Around me, the surviving brothers of my company knelt in prayer, their armor scorched, their seals gone, their eyes faintly luminous. They murmured oaths I did not recognize, words that felt both ancient and newborn. I did not command them to stop. For the first time, their faith was their own. We buried the dead at the edge of the crater. There were too many to name, so we gave them one epitaph. He fought for the Emperor's truth, whatever it became. The ground refused to stay still. Each mound pulsed faintly, as though the world itself remembered them. Perhaps in time it would resurrect them. Perhaps it already had. I recorded my account in the chapter's log. I wrote of tactical maneuvers, casualty ratios, estimated losses, the language of the codex, disciplined, precise. But when I reached the section titled Moral Evaluation, I stopped. There were no metrics for revelation. I left the page blank, sealing it with my signet. The blankness itself was truth enough. Brother Tiberon approached me at dusk. His face was pale, his expression serene. "We have done what we were created for," he said. "We endured," I nodded. "Endurance is not victory," he smiled faintly. "No, Captain, but it is evolution." Then he turned toward the storm-lit horizon, and for an instant his outline blurred, as though he were being rewritten by light. In the nights that followed, I could no longer sleep. My dreams were filled with visions, ultramarines walking beside demons, cathedrals built of light and bone, Gilliman's statue weeping oil that became blood. In one vision I saw the Emperor upon his golden throne, eyes open, lips moving. The sound he made was not command but question. When I awoke, my armor's auspex recorded a faint psychic pulse synchronized with my heartbeat. The surviving tech marines examined the relic shards of St. Livia. They found them warm, emitting a rhythm like a living heart. I ordered them sealed in adamantium, though part of me feared containment more than exposure. I could not tell whether the relic was still holy or had become the storm's seed. In either case, it was sacred, for holiness and horror had become indistinguishable. Weeks passed. Reinforcements never came. Supplies dwindled, yet we did not hunger. The planet itself seemed to sustain us, air richer, soil warm, water flowing again through once dead conduits. Tarsis Ultima was alive. It had been a shrine to faith. Now it was faith incarnate, a living testament to what devotion could summon when pushed beyond reason. One evening I gathered my brothers in the crater's heart. We recited the oath of restoration, though the words came altered without our intent. The final line, "We serve the Emperor's will," emerged instead as "We are the Emperor's will." No one corrected it. The silence after was heavy, not with fear, but acceptance. I realized then that the transformation was complete. From orbit, our augurs showed the storm solidifying into a permanent halo above the world, a ring of light, visible even through the void. Ships that strayed too close vanished, their vox transmissions dissolving into hymnals. The Mechanicus declared the planet quarantined. I sent no protest. Some truths are not meant for the uninitiated. Still, I sent a single astropathic transmission to Macraga before the warp storm severed all communication. It read, "Faith has changed. We endure." I do not know if it ever reached them. Perhaps Guilliman himself will read it. Perhaps he will burn it unread. The Ultramarines must remain pure, but I am no longer certain purity is strength. In the years that followed, pilgrims began to arrive, not from the Imperium, but from beyond its sanctioned roots. Word spread of a world reborn, where miracles bloomed from ash. They came without ships, borne on waves of psychic light. Some knelt at the crater and wept. Others dissolved into the soil, their bodies merging with the pulsing ground. The world accepted them all. I met one such pilgrim, a blind preacher from the distant marches. He claimed the Emperor had spoken through the storm and named this place Novum Veritas, the new truth. He asked what the truth was. I told him, "It is endurance." He smiled through tears and answered, "Then you are blessed, my lord." I did not tell him I no longer knew what blessing meant. My brothers built no new fortress. Instead, we raised columns of stone around the crater, carved not with scripture but with silence. Between them burned eternal flames that shifted between blue and violet. At night, the auroras reflected upon their armor, painting us as both angels and monsters. Perhaps that is what we had always been. In solitude, I read the Codex Astartes once more. The words remained unchanged, but I saw new meaning in their precision. Guilliman had written it to preserve order in chaos, not to forbid evolution. Perhaps he too had glimpsed what lay beyond purity, a unity born not of obedience, but of endurance. I closed the tome and placed it upon the altar of stone. It no longer bound me. It guided me. There were days when I missed the old prayer, their simplicity, their certainty. Yet certainty is a luxury of the blind. We who have seen the Emperor's shadow must live with ambiguity. I have learned that doubt is the truest form of faith. To question is not to betray. It is to revere more deeply than obedience allows. Once I asked the storm a final question. I stood upon the crater's edge and spoke aloud. What are we now? The wind carried no words, but the aurora flared, forming a vast sigil that mirrored the twin-headed Aquila, one wing golden, the other violet. The answer was clear. We were both that loyal and damned, sons of order and of change, the Imperium reborn within its own contradictions. Tiberin disappeared soon after. Some say he walked into the crater and was taken by the light. Others claim he ascended into the sky. I do not mourn him. I envy him. He had faith enough to embrace the storm without fear. I remain here still, bound by duty, half in awe, half in dread. As I write these final words, the storm grows quiet above. The world sleeps, content in its sanctified mutation. I have seen the Emperor's face reflected in corruption, and the warp's reflection shining with grace. I no longer separate them. Perhaps that is blasphemy. Perhaps it is truth. In this galaxy, they are often the same. I am Captain Laertes of the Ultramarines, once guardian of purity, now witness to its transformation. I no longer pray for victory nor for forgiveness. I pray only for endurance, that I may carry this revelation long enough to understand it. If the Emperor still watches, may he see not rebellion, but evolution. And as the bells beneath the world toll once more, faint, eternal, I whisper the final line of my life's creed. Written not in the Codex, but in blood and light, faith is not purity. Faith is survival in the storm.